My family skipped my law school graduation for my brother's new company launch. Mom texted, "His future matters. Your little degree can wait." I smiled. What my grandfather left me made them regret choosing him. I wore the cap and gown in an empty apartment at 7:14 in the morning. The ceremony was at 10. I adjusted the tassel in front of the bathroom mirror and stood there for 30 seconds because nobody was going to watch me do it later. The gown was rented, $87 for the day, and the cap sat crooked no matter how many times I pressed it flat. Grandfather's coffee mug was on the counter behind me, dark blue ceramic with a chip on the handle where I dropped it when I was 23. He kept using it after that. Said broken things still hold coffee. I drank mine standing up. The apartment was quiet. My phone lit up at 6:48 a.m. I saw Mom's name and picked it up. "Kent's opening is today. His future matters. Your little degree can wait. We'll celebrate next week." I read it twice. Set the phone face down on the counter. Finished my coffee. There are things worth knowing before the ceremony. Walter Pruitt was my mother's father, and he started having Saturday coffee with me when I was 21. Same diner every week, same corner booth, same dark blue mug he brought from home because the diner's mugs were too thin and the coffee went cold. We did that for 4 years until he died at 79. He had started it the spring I moved out of my parents' house and into a studio apartment across town. He called one Friday evening and said he wanted to have breakfast. I said I thought he meant Sunday. He said no, Saturday. He gave me the address of the diner, told me 8 a.m., and hung up. I showed up. He was already in the corner booth with his mug and a carafe the waitress had left for him. We talked about nothing important for the first few months. His real estate properties, 3 of them at that point, commercial units he had bought and managed for 20 years. My classes. Whether the studio apartment had good enough windows. He asked questions and listened to the answers, which was not something that happened much in our family. He remembered what I told him from week to week. He asked follow-up questions. After a few months of this, I understood that the Saturday breakfasts were not casual. They were a decision he had made about how to know me. Every Thursday evening he would call and tell me to come to whatever family dinner was happening that week. I always went because the call was the reason. At the table I would sit at the end while my mother called Kent first and asked about his plans, and I would listen and answer when I was asked, and Walter would sit across from me and drink his coffee and say nothing about any of it. Walter watched the family choose Kent at every turn for years. He watched them give Kent $185,000 for a tap room while I worked 3 jobs through law school. A copy shop from 7 to noon, a university library from 1 to 5, and a restaurant 4 nights a week from 6 to closing. $92,000 was the total cost of law school across 3 years. $48,000 was what I still owed when I graduated. $0 came from my parents. Not for applications, not for a single semester, not once. Walter never said a word about any of it. He showed up every Saturday and asked how the courses were going and refilled his mug from the carafe and let me talk. The last Saturday before he died, 2 years before graduation, he pushed the blue mug across the table. "Keep it," he said. "You'll need it more than I will." I took it home without fully understanding what he meant, and I didn't ask, because there was no version of that sentence that seemed to need clarification. The Thanksgiving before graduation, 6 months earlier, the family had dinner at my parents' house. 6 people at the table. My parents, Kent, Kent's girlfriend, me, and Aunt Sharon, who is Vivian's oldest friend and has been coming to family dinners since before I was born. Kent had his taproom lease signed by then, the build-out underway. He talked about it through the entire meal. Suppliers, tap lines, the opening date, the design of the sign. He was loud about it the way people are loud about things they believe in. Halfway through dinner, Vivian said, "Kent is opening a real business. A real business with a lease and suppliers and a grand opening and people investing in him. You are sitting in a library memorizing case law that nobody in this family will ever need. 3 years of school, and what do you have? A piece of paper and $48,000 in debt. Kent has a building. You have a student loan. I know which one of my children I would bet on. She said it the way someone says a thing they have been thinking for a long time and finally found the right audience for. Not cruel in tone, just stated, as if it were obvious, and it was time someone said it. Kent looked at me from across the table. Bro, you have been in school since you were 18. What are you going to do with it? Open a law office in Mom's garage? You don't have clients. You don't have a firm. You have a diploma on the way and a pile of bills. I'm already making moves. Come work for me if you need a job. I will pay you $15 an hour to clean taps. The table went quiet for a moment. Sharon looked at her plate. Harlan said nothing. Kent's girlfriend laughed briefly and stopped. I said thanks. And I meant it to sound like nothing, and it did. The ceremony was at 10. I arrived at 9:15, found my row in the auditorium, and sat down. The seats to my left and right were empty when the processional started. Daphne slid into the seat on my left 2 minutes before the dean took the podium. She didn't ask where my family was. She put her hand on the armrest between us and left it there. She was the one person who knew what those empty seats cost, and she chose not to say anything about them, which was the right decision. The dean called my name at 10:47. I walked across the stage, took the diploma, shook the dean's hand. I looked out at the auditorium for 1 second from the stage. My row had Daphne in it. The rows around it had strangers. I smiled, not because I was fine with any of it. Walter had said something 2 weeks before he died, sitting in the corner booth with his mug. Elliot, the thing about being underestimated is that it buys you time. He hadn't explained it. I hadn't understood it. Standing on that stage with my diploma and my empty row, holding the smile while the photographer found the angle, I was just starting to. If you have been listening to Betrayal Unfolded and this one is reaching somewhere specific, stay with it. What happened 3 days after graduation is why I am telling this story. 3 days after I graduated, my phone rang at 8:30 in the morning. Oscar Vance, attorney. I knew the name from Walter's funeral. He had been Walter's personal attorney for 11 years, the man who had organized the estate paperwork. He said, "Your grandfather left instructions. They activate upon completion of your degree. I need you in my office." Then he gave me the address and a time, Thursday 10 a.m. He said nothing else. I sat with that for 2 days. I told Daphne when she called to check in after graduation. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Did he ever tell you he was leaving you anything?" I thought about it. "He gave me a mug," I said. She laughed a little. Neither of us knew yet how precisely correct that would turn out to be. Oscar's office was on the 4th floor of a building on Merchant Street. Wood paneling, filing cabinets floor to ceiling on 2 walls. A credenza with a framed photograph of Walter holding a fish on a dock somewhere I didn't recognize. The office smelled like old paper and coffee. The specific smell of a place where important documents are handled every day and the handling never stops. Oscar shook my hand, gestured to the chair across from his desk, and without preamble slid a folder across to me. I noticed he did not explain what was in it before I opened it. He let me read. Irrevocable trust. Established 2.5 years earlier, when I was midway through my 2nd year of law school. Sole beneficiary, Elliot Pruitt. Assets, 1 commercial building at 412 Locust Street, appraised at $1.8 million. Cash deposit, $340,000. Activation condition, completion of a Juris Doctor degree from an accredited law school. Hold period, 15 years from date of activation. Trust property cannot be sold, transferred, mortgaged, or otherwise disposed of. I read the entire document. I had spent 3 years learning to read these things, and I read it the way I had been trained to, paragraph by paragraph, clause by clause. Every line was standard and professional and ironclad. Spendthrift provision to protect the beneficiary from family pressure. Corporate trustee designation so administration could not be interfered with. Successor beneficiary clause if I died before the hold period ended. Walter had not built this casually or quickly. He had sat in this office and told Oscar exactly what he wanted built and Oscar had built it. Then I turned to the tenant list. Unit 1, Hartwell Dental Group. Lease, $4,800 per month. Unit 2, Crenshaw Accounting Partners. Lease, $6,100 per month. Unit 3, Bloom and Move Yoga Studio. Lease, $4,900 per month. Unit 4, Kent's Taproom LLC. Lease, $6,200 per month. 4 tenants, $22,000 per month. $264,000 per year in rental income managed by Oscar's firm, deposited into the trust account since Walter died. I read Unit 4 twice. I set the paper down. The mug was on Oscar's desk. I had brought it from habit, tucked it into my bag that morning without thinking about it, and apparently taken it out while I was reading. The chip on the handle was facing me. Oscar was watching. He said, "Your grandfather wanted you to have this when you were prepared to use it well. He believed law school would make you ready." I almost called my mother from Oscar's chair. Kent's name was on the 4th line of the tenant list, and the document in my hands was worth more than anything my family had done for me in 27 years combined, and I could feel the weight of both things simultaneously. But the mug was on the desk. Walter had never made a move in anger in his life. He waited until the thing he was building was finished, and then he let it stand. So I put the phone in my pocket and asked Oscar to explain Section 12.3. Section 12.3. Upon change in beneficial ownership, all existing leases shall be subject to renegotiation at current market rates within 90 days. Standard clause in commercial real estate protects incoming owners from below-market tenants. Oscar said the current market rate for Kent's unit, based on recent comparable leases in the same neighborhood, was $9,400 per month. Kent was paying $6,200. The gap was $3,200 a month. Walter had set the original rate intentionally below market to attract reliable tenants when he first leased the units 3 years earlier. Oscar said he would send renegotiation notices to all 4 tenants on day 10. Standard procedure. All of them had 90 days. Kent would not know, from the notice, who the new owner was. The notice would come from the trust entity. His name would not appear on it. I drove to 412 Locust Street on day 7. I had not told anyone I was going. I parked on the street across from the building and sat in the car for 2 minutes before I got out. 3-story brick, black awning across all 4 storefronts. A row of second-floor windows above the commercial units that caught the late morning light. The brick was the kind of brick you see on buildings from the early part of the last century. A slightly irregular red with mortar lines that had been repointed at some point. The new mortar a shade lighter than the original. Unit 4 had a neon sign in the window. Kent's Taproom in green letters. One letter slightly dimmer than the others. Through the glass I could see a bartender behind the bar and 2 people at a table near the window. Kent's car was in the lot behind the building. I recognized the truck he'd bought 2 years ago. I stood across the street for 6 minutes. I counted them because I was aware of counting them. The way you count things when you are trying to stay present in a moment that is larger than you expected. Then I walked the perimeter. I counted the windows on each floor, ran my hand along the south wall where the brick changed color at the corner, a repair from before Walter bought it, the replacement brick slightly brighter than the original. My grandfather had owned this building for 5 years. He had walked these same walls. He had looked at Unit 4 from this same sidewalk and seen his other grandson's name on the sign. He had known, at that moment, what I didn't know yet. I did not go in. I called Daphne from the parking lot, and she came to my apartment that evening. I had the trust documents spread across the kitchen table. She read them in order, slowly, the way she reads everything. She got to the tenant list and stopped. Read it again. Got to Section 12.3 and read it a 3rd time. Then she looked up. "Your grandfather saw everything," she said. "He never said a word," I said. "He just built it." She read in silence for about 10 minutes. When she got to the tenant list, she stopped. "Read it again." Got to Section 12.3 and her finger traced the line. She turned 2 more pages, set the document down, and looked at the window over the kitchen sink for a moment. Then she picked up the blue mug from the counter turned it over, examined the chip on the handle. She had seen the mug many times in the past 3 years. It was always on my kitchen counter, always in my bag, the one constant presence in what had been an inconsistent 3 years. She looked at it the way you look at an object when you finally understand what it means. She set it back down, handle facing me. He gave you the mug and the building. The mug was so you'd remember him. The building was so you'd never need them. She said it quietly, not as a revelation, but as a recognition, the way you say something when you have been turning it over for the last 10 minutes and have finally found the right words for it. I didn't say anything. There was nothing to add. She left at 9 p.m. I sat at the kitchen table for a while after she left and thought about Walter sitting across from me in the booth every Saturday for 4 years, refilling his mug, asking about my coursework, watching me talk about cases and professors, and the specific exhaustion of working 3 jobs while keeping up with civil procedure. He never mentioned the building. He never mentioned the trust. He just showed up every week, asked the right questions, and let me believe I was managing on my own. That was, I realize now, the most patient form of protection I had ever encountered. He could have told me at any point. He could have sat across from me one Saturday and said, "I have set something up for you. It will be waiting when you finish." That would have changed everything. My relationship with the family, the dinners I went to, the way I understood myself in the space they had built around me. He chose not to tell me. He let me build myself the way I was building myself, without a safety net I knew about, because he understood that the person who would know how to use what he had built needed to become themselves first. I was 27 years old and 2 weeks out of law school, and I was only just beginning to understand what it meant that someone had been watching carefully enough to see all of it. I almost told Oscar to hold Kent's lease at the original rate when the notices went out on day 10. There was a version of that phone call, adjust the other 3, leave Unit 4 untouched. But Walter had written the same clause into every lease. He had not created a carve-out for Unit 4. He had built a system with consistent rules, and I understood what that meant, and I let the notices go out. Day 12. Oscar called. Kent had received the renegotiation notice and contacted the management firm. He had asked who purchased the building. The firm told him the property transferred to an irrevocable trust entity. The beneficiary name was not disclosed. Kent was operating in the dark. "There is something else," Oscar said. He asked me to come back to the office the next morning. Oscar had a second file on his desk when I arrived, Walter's trust amendment, dated 3 months before his death. The original activation condition, typewritten, upon the beneficiary reaching 30 years of age. The amendment, handwritten on notarial paper and signed by Walter in a hand that was shakier than I remembered from the birthday cards he used to send, upon the beneficiary's completion of a Juris Doctor degree from an accredited institution. Oscar set the amendment down. He changed it after attending your brother's lease signing. He was present when your brother signed the commercial lease at 412 Locust. He told me afterward that he had recognized the address. His building. He sat in that room and watched your brother sign a lease on a property that was designated for your brother's sibling. He paused. He came to my office the following week and amended the trust. He told me the degree would be the right signal, that a person who finishes law school is someone who knows how to use what they've been given. Walter had known. He had sat in the room with the lease documents and understood exactly what was happening. His building, his tenant, his 2 grandsons on opposite sides of a set of choices the family had already been making for years. He had understood that the family was building Kent up and leaving me to build myself, and he had understood that the graduation was the specific moment they would choose to skip. So he made the graduation irreplaceable. He changed one line in a legal document, and the degree that Vivian called little became the switch that turned on a $2 million trust. He did not tell me. He did not warn the family. He did not intervene in any dinner or any phone call or any Thanksgiving conversation. He just changed the activation condition, said nothing, and waited for the pattern to play out exactly the way he knew it would. The text Vivian sent at 6:48 a.m., the empty row in the auditorium, The photograph of Kent's taproom launch that landed on the family group chat while I was walking across the stage, all of it was the shape of a choice that had already determined the outcome. They had chosen. The degree had activated. The building had transferred. Walter had seen all of it coming and had decided not to stop it, but to let it mean something. I sat in Oscar's office and looked at the amendment and understood that my grandfather had spent the last months of his life building something that would speak after he was gone. He had not been able to correct the family, so he had built something that would outlast all of it. The degree could not wait. Grandfather had made certain of that 3 months before he died. Same day, day 12, Kent opened the renegotiation letter at the taproom. $9,400. He read it standing at the bar. His current monthly revenue averaged around $12,000. He had suppliers, equipment loans, 2 part-time staff, and a liquor license renewal coming up in 4 months. He called Vivian. The call was brief and not quiet. She called Harlan. The 3 of them were at the taproom within 2 hours. Stay with this. Betrayal Unfolded covers every chapter of stories exactly like this one, and exactly like yours. Subscribe if this is the kind of ending you needed to see. Day 14 was a Saturday. Walter would have appreciated the timing. I drove to 412 Locust Street for the second time. I had no plan to encounter my family. I came because the building was mine, and I had not yet been inside it. I pushed the front door open and walked in, and immediately understood why the 3 of them were there. Kent was behind the bar, Vivian and Harlan at the high-top table by the window. 2 taproom staff were the only other people in the building. The neon sign was off. The space had the stillness of a room where people had been arguing and stopped. Vivian stood up before I reached the bar. Whatever your grandfather arranged, you need to reverse it. Kent has a real business here. Real employees and real suppliers and a real lease, and he cannot absorb a $3,000 rent increase on what this place earns. I sat on a bar stool at the near end of the bar. Kent watched me with both hands flat on the bar surface. The young woman restocking the shelves on the far wall had stopped moving. Vivian said, "We chose Kent because his business needed us at that specific moment. Your law school didn't need anything from us. You had the loans, you had the jobs, you always figured it out." She said it the way a person delivers a sentence they believe is reasonable. You were the one who handled things on your own. We didn't worry about you because you never needed us to. The refrigeration unit behind the bar cycled on. Nobody in the room said anything. "You didn't worry about me," I said. "You texted me at 6:48 in the morning on the day I graduated law school and told me my degree could wait. There were empty seats in my row at the ceremony. My family could have made it. They chose not to. I kept my voice even throughout, and that degree activated a trust worth $2.1 million. Your father built it for me and made the graduation the trigger." Kent's jaw tightened. His cheek moved twice. "What trust?" "A commercial real estate trust. This building. The one your family has been renting from for 8 months at below market rate. 4 tenants, $22,000 a month in rental income, $264,000 a year. The trust holds the building for 15 years from activation date." I looked at the tap handles, the shelves, the walls. "This is my building, Kent. Your grandfather put it in my name." Vivian's hands went to her purse strap and gripped it. Harlan had not moved from his chair near the door. He was looking at the floor, and he continued to look at the floor throughout what followed. "You gave Kent $185,000, I said. "Not a loan, a gift. For a business." I got nothing for 3 years of law school. Not for applications, not for tuition, not for a single month. I worked a copy shop and a library and a restaurant and came home after midnight 4 nights a week and graduated with $48,000 in debt. Kent's taproom earns $12,000 a month and cannot sustain the market rate on a commercial lease. Vivian said, "Elliot, stop." Grandfather sat across from me every Saturday for 4 years and watched the same dinners I did. He watched the first calls go to Kent and the last seats go to me, and he never said a word about it. He changed the trust activation from my 30th birthday to law school completion 3 months before he died, after he attended Kent's lease signing and recognized the address of his own building. He sat in a room and watched Kent sign a commercial lease on a property that was going to belong to me the day I graduated. He came back to his attorney and changed one line. I looked at Kent. You told me at Thanksgiving to come work for you if I needed a job. $15 an hour to clean taps. You said I had a diploma on the way and a pile of bills and nowhere to go. You said I would end up in Mom's garage. I paused. This building generates $264,000 a year in rental income. Your lease is one of 4. I do not clean taps. I own the building they are in. Kent said, "This is insane. You cannot do this." "I can," I said. And grandfather made sure I had no choice but to. The spendthrift provision in the trust exists specifically so that under family pressure I cannot give away what he built. He knew what pressure looks like. He sat across from it every Saturday. To Vivian, you called it a little degree. That little degree activated a $1.8 million building and $340,000 in cash. It triggered the lease clause that renegotiates your son's rent to market rate, $9,400 a month. The degree did all of that. Elliot, be reasonable. He is your brother. He is my brother who told me I would end up cleaning taps. You are my mother who told me my graduation could wait. I am not adjusting the lease below market. I am not rescinding the renegotiation notice. I am not selling the building. I am not buying Kent out of his lease, and I am not having another conversation about this with anyone in this family. The trust is administered by Oscar Vance. His number is on the renegotiation letter. Then, because it needed to be said in a room where all 3 of them were present, I am done being the one who figures it out alone and shows up anyway. The one you don't worry about. The one whose graduation can wait. We are done. Kent pushed back from the bar stool. His hands stayed on the bar. He swallowed once. Then I will buy it, whatever your price is. Name it. I will get a loan. I will find investors. Just tell me the number. I picked up my phone and opened the trust document to section 4.2. I read it out loud, at normal speed, the way I had been trained to read binding text. The trust property shall not be sold, transferred, mortgaged, or otherwise disposed of for a period of 15 years from the date of activation. I put the phone down. Grandfather made sure. The building is not for sale. Not to you, not to anyone, not for 15 years. He built it so I could not give it away under pressure, and so no one could take it from me. It is the most patient thing I have ever seen. The condensation ring under Kent's glass was the only thing in the room that kept moving. Nobody spoke. I almost stayed. Ordered a cup of coffee and drank it at a table in a building I owned while they watched. But Walter never gloated. He built things and walked away from them and let them stand on their own. So I stood up and walked out the front door and left the building to say the rest. You said my degree could wait. Grandfather said his building couldn't. The lease clause activated the day I graduated. The degree was the key. Daphne was in the parking lot. She had come when I texted her the address without asking for an explanation. I got in the passenger seat. She drove to the diner where Walter used to bring the mug. I ordered coffee. Paper cup. The blue mug was at home. Day 15 morning, Kent arrived at the tap room and stood in front of the property management placard mounted beside the entrance. The placard had been updated. New entity name, Walter Pruitt Trust. New contact, Oscar Vance, Esq. Kent's name was on the black awning above the door. His grandfather's name was on the placard beside it. He stood there for 60 seconds without moving. Then he unlocked the door and went inside. The tap handles were cold. Day 18. Aunt Sharon called Vivian. I want to ask you something. Vivian said, Sharon, please. I was at that Thanksgiving dinner when you told Elliot his degree was a piece of paper and his debt was evidence that he'd made the wrong choice. I remember how you said it, like it was an observation, not an attack. Sharon's voice was steady and deliberate. I was at Kent's launch party on graduation day. I watched you celebrate his bar opening on the morning of your other son's law school graduation. You were there for 2 hours before I even asked about Elliot, and you said he understood." She paused. "And now it turns out his grandfather left him the building the bar is in, a trust he built and sealed while Elliot was still in law school. Your father watched all of this happening, Viv, and he left your sons very different things." Vivian said something about it being more complicated than that Walter had always had his own ideas about things that she hadn't known. Sharon said, "It doesn't look complicated from here. It looks like he saw something clearly, and you didn't." She did not call back after that. The call ended, and the kitchen at Vivian's house was quiet in a way that had a specific texture to it. The quiet of a room where something true has been said, and nobody wants to be the first one to move. Day 21. Kent's college friend who had contributed $40,000 at the taproom launch called. He had heard about the building situation. "I need my capital back, Kent. You're carrying equipment loans. You've got a 47% rent increase coming, and you just told me the building owner is your estranged brother. I cannot keep money in this." After the call, Kent's operating account had $8,400 in it. He sat in the empty taproom at 10 in the evening and wrote numbers on a cocktail napkin. Revenue, $12,000. New rent, $9,400. Equipment loan payments, $1,200 per month. Staff, 2 part-time employees, $800 per month. Total fixed cost before supplies and licenses, $11,400. Net margin before variable costs, $600 per month. Before supplies, before the liquor license renewal, before replacing the tap head that had been failing for 3 weeks. He had been open for 8 months. He had worked toward this for 2 years before that. The concept, the business plan, the search for the right space, the conversations with suppliers, the long negotiations on the lease. Vivian and Harlan had believed in him. They had given him $185,000 and stood beside him at the launch party on a Saturday in late June. A party that had happened on the same morning as his brother's law school graduation in an auditorium across town. He folded the napkin in half, then in half again, put it in his jacket pocket, stood up and turned off the neon sign. The green letters went dark one by one, and the room went the color of a place that closes for the night without knowing whether it will reopen in the morning. On Merchant Street, in Elliot's apartment, the bar exam prep books were open on the desk. Constitutional law, evidence, civil procedure, contracts, torts, the binders color-tabbed and annotated in the margins, open to the morning's outline. 3 weeks of prep had passed since graduation. The bar exam was in 5 weeks. I had a schedule taped to the wall above the desk, 8 subjects, 4 weeks of review, 1 week of practice exams. Every day accounted for. Every day moving forward. The mug was on the desk, coffee still warm inside it, same chip on the handle that had been there since I was 23, same hairline crack along the base that Walter had called a feature rather than a flaw. Morning light through the window above the desk. The kind of light that arrives in a room where someone is working rather than waiting. On the other side of town, at a high-top table in a tap room that Kent's grandfather had owned, Kent was running the math again. A $6,200 lease had become $9,400. An investor had pulled $40,000 out of the operating account. Revenue of $12,000 was not a buffer against costs of $11,400 before variable expenses, and the liquor license renewal was coming in 6 weeks. The neon sign in the window still said Kent's Tap Room. The property management placard beside the door now said Walter Pruitt Trust. Vivian's voicemail was 2 weeks old on my phone. I had not played it. I looked at the notification, closed the app, picked up my evidence outline. The trust documents were in a folder on the shelf behind me, closed and filed. Filed, closed, handled the building, was 3 miles away, generating $22,000 a month in rental income managed by Oscar's firm, running exactly the way my grandfather had designed it to run. He had built it to work without me, so I could focus on what came next. He had built the whole thing around the idea that I would pass my bar exam. So that is what I was doing. The mug sat on the desk. The chip on the handle caught the morning light the way small flaws catch light when you stop trying to conceal them. Walter used this mug for 4 years after I cracked it. He said the crack didn't matter. He said broken things still hold coffee. He was right about the mug. He was always right. He built a building and put it in a trust and changed one line in a legal document 3 months before he died. And the family that skipped a graduation activated it without knowing they were holding the key. He was right about the mug. He was right about all of it. If you made it to the end of this, you know what this channel is about. Betrayal Unfolded is where stories like this one come when they are ready to be told. Subscribe. There is always another one coming.